Hello, welcome to the Jane Austen Centre. Would you like to just introduce yourself to anyone who hasn't come across you before?
I'm Rachel Knowles. I live in Weymouth with my husband Andrew. Takes all the photographs that you see on the website. My website is regencyhistory.net. I started blogging about 8 years ago now, and because I love the period and wanted to write a story based in the time of Jane Austen. So I started researching the period, and I blog about my research on Regency history. And as a result of that, I got invited to write a history book for Pen and Sword Books, and my book, What Regency Women Did for Us, is about 12 Regency women.
Yeah, and they're a fascinating mix. How did you choose which women to include in your book? Did you have an idea of who you wanted to write about when you began writing, or did you research Regency women and then make a shortlist?
That's an interesting question. I was choosing women specifically that lived during the Regency, and actually quite a lot of the women that you might be familiar with in the period, like Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, they actually died before the Regency period actually started. So I was ruling out people like her. I wanted people that actually were alive in the Regency period. All of the women, apart from Jane Austen, lived throughout the whole of the Regency, from 1811 to 1820. Jane Austen obviously died during that period, but I couldn't leave her out.
Yes. Who was your favourite woman to write about of the 12 that you did?
This is a very hard question. It's a hard question because Jane Austen has been the love of my life in terms of author since I was a teenager. That's probably where the love of the period came from, and I read a lot of romances that based in that period, and that was what stimulated me to do the research and the blog in the first place. So Jane Austen has to be up there, but actually several of the other women were very inspiring. I think one of my favourites is Eleanor Coade, because I love the way that she made a mark in a man's world. You know, she ran an artificial stone manufactory that was successful, whereas the man that she took over the factory from basically failed, and that's why she was able to take it over. And I like the fact that in my hometown of Weymouth, there's a piece of Coade stone, a statue of George III, right there on the seafront.
Why is it such a key period to study, or is it such a key period to study? Is it still relevant to us today?
I think the interesting thing about the Regency period is, although technically speaking it was a period of just 9 years while George III was incapacitated because of his mental ill health, and his son George, the future George IV, was ruling as regent, hence the name the Regency period. But actually, when people think of Regency, they think of a much wider period, a Regency feel. So it's the time of the great romantic poetry and literature. It's a time when a lot of the shackles of the very strict Georgian era under George III. So George III was really quite simple in his outlook. He wasn't extravagant, where George IV was very flamboyant character. Now, a lot of people didn't like that, but nevertheless, that's the feeling that people today look back and they think that was a time of romance. Well, actually, it was a time of quite a hard time for women. They didn't have many rights, and I think it's very encouraging today to look back and say, well, actually, although it was such a hard time for women, they didn't have many options. So many of them died in childbirth if they got married and had families. But actually, there were women who did things then, 200 years ago, that are still evident today. And I think that's what I found so fascinating about the period. The fact that Eleanor's Coade stone is still there on my seafront, also in London and various other places. The fact that you could go to the Natural History Museum and you can see fossils that Mary Anning found. The fact that acting today is a perfectly acceptable, respectable profession for women, whereas in the time of the Georgians, it was really, if you went on stage as a woman, you were seen as little better than a courtesan. You know, that you were, if you were prepared to display your body on stage, it was considered that you weren't a respectable woman. But actually, Sarah Siddons managed to change that, or start to change that process. She was even invited to become reader to the princesses. That's how respected she was, and that had a vast influence on her profession.